Hello everyone and welcome back. Path of Exile 2 is a large, complex game with an equally large endgame that can be confusing for new players, especially if you've never played a game like this before. So you've completed the campaign and hit level 60, and now you're wondering where to go next. What the hell is the Atlas and why am I still playing this game? Well, don't worry because the campaign is just the tutorial. There's a lot more to come. The endgame in Path of Exile 2 revolves around a mechanic called the Atlas, an infinite globe spanning out in all directions. To progress through the endgame, you'll be exploring this infinite continent, making content harder and harder, and in return you'll be rewarded with new, unique mechanics and more powerful loot. Our final goal throughout all of this is to find and defeat the Arbiter, but we'll get to that in a second. So now we know what's in store for us in the endgame, let's look at the Atlas in a little more detail. The Atlas is essentially a large, infinite map with nodes on it, just like the campaign, and it kind of reminds me a bit of like Super Mario, but on steroids. Blue means the map is accessible but not completed. Green means that map has been completed, and grey means that the node is inaccessible. Easy peasy. But how do we actually get into a map? Well, in true Path of Exile style, one doesn't just simply enter a map. That would be too easy. Instead, we need to use items known as Waystones. These little guys drop from nearly all endgame content, and you'll start finding them during the last bits of the campaign, around level 55. Waystones are what we can use to modify maps and content to our liking. They can be found at different levels of difficulty, spanning from tier 1 all the way up to tier 16, the most difficult content that currently exists in the game, and it is hard. I can't even play it and I'm writing a damn guide on the thing. As you increase your map tier, you'll begin to find higher and higher level monsters, more frequent league content, and as a reward, more experience points, more exciting powerful drops, more currency, and more items. Because let's be real, that's what we're all here for, right? But it gets a little more complicated than that. Waystones can be modified just like any other item, and to fiddle around with Waystones we can use currency. Just like items, we can add prefix and suffix modifiers to a Waystone, which will in turn modify the content, difficulty, and reward of the map when you run it. Or, you know, leave it in the bank to rot for years because you're too scared to play that 40% monster elemental resistance map. I feel your pain. To modify a map, we can use transmutation and augmentation orbs to make a map blue, with 2 modifiers. And then we can go even further with regal and exalt orbs to make it rare with 6 modifiers. But be careful, using expensive currency, especially on lower tier maps, will often be a waste. So, adding a bunch of crazy modifiers to the map to the point that not only your character, but also your computer might melt. This is called juicing in the community. Juicing can cause a map to become much more difficult, and it can be dangerous depending on what build you're running. You'll want to check what modifiers each map has before committing to dying inside of it, and in some cases, you might want to avoid the map entirely. So, now we know more about Waystones, but there's another mechanic that we can use to modify our endgame content. As you explore, you'll notice these towers, and these are called Precursor Towers, and these are important. Precursor Towers are maps that can be found dotted randomly around the Atlas. Once you've found one, run the map like you would any other, and then die to these stupid invisible shades. Wait, no, sorry. Run the map and then activate the beacon at the end. Now we can go back to the map on the Atlas screen, and you'll see that we can juice up the Atlas itself. Now we can add a precursor tablet to the tower, which will then beef up maps in a specific radius around it. The modifiers can change and will be dependent on the type of precursor tablet that you've used. These can also drop from most endgame content, and they can be upgraded to magic with currency, but they can't go to rare just yet. You can use these towers and tablets to modify content to become more difficult or to spawn more of the same type of mechanics that you enjoy. But wait, what the hell is a league mechanic? Let's talk about some of the unique mechanics that you'll only find in the endgame. Most of Path of Exile 2's league mechanics are reiterations of league content that was released in Path of Exile 1, and you won't see it until you're already in the endgame, so there's going to be a few new surprises. Regular mechanics that start to pop up in the endgame include smaller ones, like shrines and strongboxes. Shrines are tiny structures that you'll find slathered in monsters like a chocolate fountain. These can be activated and will provide you with increased power for a short period of time. Think of them like power-ups from arcade games, and they can include things like making every single hit a critical, or get an increased experience, which is great, or turning drops into gold, which is bad. A great opportunity for me to get off my arse and do something else for 30 seconds. Strongboxes are another small mechanic introduced in the Atlas. Chests which can be opened and looted after dealing with the monsters that spawn around it. In their current state, strongboxes are pretty bad, but I really like the cool smoke animation. They can be found in varying rarity from normal all the way up to unique, and they can provide different rewards depending on the type. For example, some boxes might only reward currency, where others might give you gear instead. You can even modify strongboxes further by adding your own currency into them. Just try and be careful with those Val orbs. I would confiscate them off you if I could. Essences are another small mechanic which involves finding and defeating essence monsters trapped in ice. Find one, mash your mouse and then defeat the monster inside. They're essentially rares beefed up in some way or another, and killing them rewards specific essence currency that you can use to deterministically craft items. Some essences might allow you to craft items with specific modifiers like extra life, defense, or extra elemental damage, so they can be worth some cash if you get lucky. So, these are the smaller mechanics that you'll start to encounter in the endgame. but there's a few more significantly larger ones as well. Breach is one of the main types of endgame content, and currently probably one of the most rewarding and in my opinion the most fun. As you explore maps on the atlas, you'll find this symbol, which indicates that a breach can be found on the map. Breaches are big weird hands which stick out of the ground like a bad reenactment of King Arthur. Rudely jumping on them causes them to span outwards, spawning more and more difficult monsters. You'll either get overwhelmed and cry, your computer will crash, or you'll kill everything and feel like Zeus himself. Killing monsters inside the breach keeps it expanding further and further until it eventually collapses. The more monsters you kill, the longer you'll be allowed to kill monsters for. As you do, you'll find reward chests known as classed hands, which can reward extremely powerful loot, including rings that can have huge amounts of quality on them. But that's not all. Breaches also have their own endgame content as well. I know, endgame inception. As you start completing breaches in tier 11 maps or higher, you'll begin to find unique loot known as breach splinters, which can be collected to create a breach stone. Like a waystone but breach flavor, this breach stone allows you to spawn a new map to the Twisted Domain, where you can find and defeat Zesht for loot and bragging rights. Delirium is the second of 4 endgame pillars, and this symbol on the atlas indicates Delirium content can be found within. To begin a Delirium encounter, find and step into the mirror at the beginning of the map, and you'll notice that the world starts to turn to mist, and some crazy guy starts whispering at you. Activating a Delirium encounter causes new delirious monsters to spawn, getting tougher and tougher as you move away from the mirror. You'll need to keep moving and killing monsters as fast as you can to keep the mist going. Stop killing monsters and your time is up. Once the encounter ends, you'll be rewarded depending on how long you lasted and how many monsters you defeated. This icon shows you what loot you're about to be blessed with. Just don't panic in the moment and die. As with Breach, Delirium offers its own unique rewards known as distilled emotions, which allow you to augment your amulets in a process known as distilling. I know, this is getting complicated, but just bear with me. By distilling equipment, you can add passive tree skills to an amulet, effectively allowing you to nab skills without wasting points to get there. Run through enough Delirium mirrors, and you'll eventually start finding simulacrum splinters at tier 11 and higher. These will allow you to create a portal to the Delirium endgame, where you'll be faced off against waves of increasingly difficult monsters and a pinnacle boss at the end. Ritual is another Atlas mechanic carried over from Path of Exile 1. Every map that contains Ritual will have 3 or 4 Ritual sites that you can activate. But be careful, monsters killed nearby will reanimate, and you'll need to defeat them all over again or die trying. As you activate more and more rituals on the same map, the monsters will be carried over until you're fighting a huge clump of them, which can get really dangerous if you're underprepared. For completing rituals, you'll get currency that can be used to buy a random selection of items, and a special currency known as omens. And these can be used to get some really good, deterministic crafting results. These are really expensive, so use them wisely. Ritual also has a pinnacle encounter which will have you fighting against the king in the mists, but you'll need to find the audience with a king item as a reward from rituals first. Expedition is the final league mechanic available in early access, and in my opinion this is one of the least enjoyable, but that's just me. Excavation sites can be explored using good old-fashioned explosives. Plop them down where you see chests, and blow them up for monsters and rewards. You'll want to plan out your encounters carefully by choosing which sites to blow up. You don't want to accidentally activate immune to physical damage. If you didn't know already, you can also manipulate the order in which these modifiers are activated, so choose your explosion path wisely. Expedition encounters reward unique loot known as artifacts, which can be collected and traded with 3 expedition NPCs, and these will be found in town. If you're lucky, you also might find a unique waystone known as a logbook. These rare waystones are a portal to the pinnacle expedition content, where you'll face off against an entire map-wide event and the final boss at the end. So, now we have an understanding of the basics of mapping, waystones, the atlas, and the mechanics that you'll find within. But there's a bit more to know about the endgame in Path of Exile 2. As you complete more and more maps, you'll complete stages of a quest which require you to fully clear specific numbers of endgame maps, starting at tier 1. As you complete them, you'll be rewarded with Atlas passive points. Yeah, there's another skill tree, because of course there is. This is Path of Exile, of course. The Atlas skill tree can be used almost exactly like the character passive skill tree. You can spend points to upgrade specific parts of endgame that you find fun and engaging, increasing waystone tiers, drop chances, quality and quantity of loot, and even the amount and size of monster packs. For a new player, I recommend putting most of your passive points into waystones, because you'll need as many of them as you can get, especially if you're dying a lot and losing them all the time. League mechanics can also be beefed up by completing the pinnacle encounter of each mechanic, and this allows you to make each league encounter more and more difficult and more rewarding, so focus on whatever content you enjoy the most. With all of that out of the way, let's talk about the endgame, the burning monolith and the Arbiter himself. As you complete maps and explore the Atlas, you'll find a location known as the Burning Monolith. This is a huge sprawling structure, and you'll only be able to enter it after finding 3 crisis fragments, a fancy way of saying keys to get through this door. Finding these fragments involves exploring the Atlas for Citadel maps. Find one and explore the crap out of it, and beat the boss at the end to be rewarded with a crisis fragment. You'll need to find the copper, iron, and stone citadels and beat the crap out of the uber bosses found inside. To find these easily, look for bright shining beacons on the Atlas screen. Activating Precursor Towers also extends the fog of war slightly, so use this to your advantage. Once you've collected all the fragments and opened the door, be prepared for a final face-off against the Arbiter himself. Not much is known about this content yet, as it's way too difficult for most players to even get to, let alone complete. So, now you know all about the endgame in Path of Exile 2. If this video helped you learn something new, drop a like or sub to the channel for more content, and leave a comment down below letting me know what you want to see next. And, as always, have a great day.